buddy. We're Cash One Pond. We're ready, we got your back, and we're unbeating all the rest of them. Here we go, you ready? Well, you want money, we got money. You need money, we got money. We're Cash One Pond. Cash One Pond. Cash One Pond. Cash One Pond. Money to lend, money to spend. We can put money in your hands. We're Cash One Pond. We're Cash One Pond. Cash One Pond. Cash One Pond. You don't have to worry. Sometimes when you're a little broke and you just need something to get over the hill, we're there with the truck. We got your back. We're Cash One Pond. Come down and see us. Cash One Pond. We're Cash One Pond. Cash One Pond. Cash One Pond. Cash One Pond. We're Cash One Pond. Cash One. Cash One Pond.
Happy after Independence Day. Happy anniversary to us. Colter Nuanez, Brooks Nuanez, Skyline Sports, our 10th anniversary Skyline at 10 celebration, counting down a variety of top 10 lists of what we've seen in the Big Sky Conference over the last 10 years. It's our 10-year anniversary, so we're doing basically things to remember from the decade that was. We put a bow on our women's basketball lists last week with our Big Sky Conference All-Stars, had a little bit of a draft, had a little bit of a lightning round. Very fun. Check out that podcast and that video, SkylineSportsMT.com, as well as the Big Sky Breakdown podcast on all your various podcast hosting platforms, as well as our YouTube channel. Please rate, review, subscribe, all that on both YouTube and on your various podcast hosting platforms. We're into men's basketball. Now we're going to do the top 10 teams of the last 10 years. And, you know, it's a little bit interesting because we don't just want to like basically rank the top 10 Big Sky Conference champions, but you kind of have to be a champion to be one of the top 10 teams. And then it's also fun to sort of put them in order and see what each team meant, not only to that program, but to the league, how they fared. So the things that we put into this top 10 list included the prowess of the players and the coach, the head coach, and also his staff, the sort of the superstar that led the team, the impact they had, their tournament performances in the Big Sky Conference tournament, also their performances in the NCAA tournament. Good performances certainly got you elevated a little bit, and if you got drilled in the NCAA tournament, maybe knocks you down a notch or two. And I tried to go through and find really significant non-conference wins. That's been sort of the story of Big Sky Conference men's basketball, is it's been sort of its own symbiotic environment. There's hardly any reputable non-conference wins. There's certainly some wins over, Summit League teams like South Dakota State, North Dakota State. But in terms of like significant Power 5 victories, you're talking like when 2015 Eastern Washington beat Indiana, when the Grizz, Montana beat Pitt in 2018. That's about it. I could hardly find any others. So I think that's a different conversation. That shows you just sort of the state of affairs in the Big Sky Conference in men's hoops over the last 10 years. But there's been a lot of good teams. I think we're kind of on the same page, Brooks and I, as well as Andrew Houghton, that probably the premier programs in the league, I think probably the premier program in the league over the last 10 years in terms of having consistent success is Eastern Washington. Montana was the best team in the league the first half of the Skyline Sports era, no question. They played in the championship game every single year. They won 2 Big Sky Conference championship tournament titles. North Dakota had a moment in time before they left the league where they were very good. Weber State, first half of the Skyline era, was very, very good. And then Northern Colorado has kind of come on in the second half of the Big Sky Conference era. And then out of nowhere, Montana State. They've been the cream of the crop in the Big Sky Conference. And Brooks, that's where I want to start before we get into some of our honorable mentions and then get into our top 10 list. There is a couple Cat teams on here. We did not include the most recent Montana State team on this list just because they were a sub-500 team before the Big Sky Conference tournament started. They got red hot. They ran all the way through, and they went to the NCAA tournament, ended up playing in the play-in game. So they're one of the only Big Sky champs of the last 10 years that don't make this list. But I think that's it shows you how much fortunes can change and also how much a head coach can impact a program. Because if you were to ask us, if we were doing Skyline at 5, like the 5-year anniversary of Skyline Sports, the Cats would be nowhere to be found, even though they have several of the top players we've ever covered, period.
Absolutely, yeah, no question.
They had it was like an impossibility that Montana State was going to be a Big Sky champion. And then Danny Sprinkle arrives, and then it was like, oh, now the Cats just do nothing but win Big Sky championships. It's crazy the way that swung. Montana Weber have been consistent for 50, 60 years in the Big Sky Conference. Eastern Washington's been very good for about 20 years and exceptionally good the last 10. It's crazy that Montana State's been able to sort of rewrite the narrative of their program because they were just basically stuck in fifth place for a quarter century.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the way sports go, though, right? I mean, it's very rare for a program to be, the bottom of the barrel or even middling for longer than a couple, cycles, if you will, a couple recruiting cycles, whether it's a 4-year gap or maybe a 8-year gap. But at some point, things turn around. But when you bring back the chosen one, the chosen son of Montana State and Danny Sprinkle, the last guy to be on, a tournament team. As a freshman, he went and lit it up, scored 30 against Weber in the title game.
In the title game, hit 7 threes.
We got to also mention that this era went from old school, true mid-major basketball into NIL and the portal.
That's right.
And that's definitely a different thing, and Danny Sprinkle was able to utilize that quite well.
There's no doubt about it. All right, so let's talk about a couple of the teams that just barely missed the cut. We have 3 teams on this list that did not go to the NCAA tournament, including 2 that highlight our honorable mentions. And we're going with basically sort of mini eras rather than pinning one specific team. But we have Northern Colorado, the last 3 Jeff Linder teams. That would have been 2017, 18, 18, 19, and 19, 20. That group included guys like Andre Spite, Jonah Radaba, Bodie Hume, guys I'm sure we're going to at least...
Jordan Davis.
Guys we're going to certainly mention in our top 10 player countdown. I don't know if any or all of them will make the top 10, but I can guarantee you all 4 of them are going to be considered.
And JD's going to be right on the edge there.
I mean, he's the second leading scorer in the history of the Big Sky Conference.
Goodness.
So, and Jonah Radaba, multiple-time Defensive Player of the Year. Bodie Hume was an awesome player for 4 years.
Yep.
Spite is as good as it gets that we've seen in the Big Sky.
I love those teams.
That Northern Colorado little run, though, they won 26 games in 18, they won 21 games in 19, and they won 22 games, in 20.
And didn't they win the CBI?
They won the CIT. So they are the only Big Sky Conference basketball program ever to win a postseason tournament, period.
Got to mention them.
You absolutely have to mention them. So that team was just outside. The differentiating factor, though, was even in that run, though, Northern Colorado, that first year when they won 26 games and won all the way to the CIT championship, they lost in the semifinals of the Big Sky tournament to Montana. They only won 1 Big Sky tournament game that year. The next 2 years, they were the 2 seed, and they got bounced in the first round. So that was sort of the thing.
Absolutely. I understand. And they won what? They went at like 11-7 in league
they were,
that one year.
They were the 5 seed.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that kind of held them back. The other team is the team that was the bracket wrecker. There was one thing that was sort of tried and true during the first 9 years of the neutral site tournament in the Big Sky Conference until the last 2 was that the number 1 seed won the championship. You're the regular season champ. Didn't matter if it was on a neutral court. You won the tournament title. That's changed the last couple of years because you had Eastern Washington losing on a buzzer beater. Then you have Eastern Washington losing in overtime to SAC the last 2 seasons. But the other thing that was tried and true is that the 1 seed never had to play the 2 seed in the championship because the 2 seed would just lose. Why did they almost always lose? Because they ran into the boys from Cedar City. Southern Utah is absolutely no question the most unorthodox program that we've covered in the Big Sky, all sports. Todd Simon recruited basically a last chance U type team. If you've ever been to Cedar City's like 18,000 people in the middle of nowhere in the southern Utah mountains, up from the canyon from Vegas. It's a dry county. There's 1 bar in the entire town. It is the sleepiest, nicest little quaint community you've ever seen.
It's a retirement community.
Yeah, Todd Simon recruited nothing but absolute dogs, guys that were on their second, third, fourth chances. They made it work somehow, and
10 junior college guys.
They wrecked brackets, absolutely wrecked the bracket multiple times, and it really called into question the strategy that teams wanted to employ going into the tournament. Do you want to chase a whole bunch of regular season wins and seeding, or do you want to be as good as you possibly can late and try to make a run?
I mean, there's never been someone in college basketball that we've covered that straight went load management. They just wouldn't play away games.
Right.
They just sit their guys.
Yes, right.
All their stars would just take turns sitting on away trips just to like rest and to try to get healthy. And then when it came tournament time, you got 6'9", 6'10" dudes jumping out of the gym that are relatively fresh and ready to run it in a one and done. Let's go.
I mean, you'd show up and you'd watch them warming up, and you're like,
What is going on?
that's the 8 seed?
Yeah.
How's that the 8 seed? One year they were the 12 seed. The 12 seed. They had the best player in the conference. Randy Onwuser scoring whatever, I think 1 million points. I think he is actually 44 points. It's the Big Sky Conference tournament record against Montana State in a game that would never end. It was a triple overtime game. Tyler Hall had 30 plus. Harold Frey had 30 plus. Randy Onwuser had more. Randy Onwuser literally fouled out half of Montana State's team. The lead of the story, I was reading it the other day. The Bobcats were filing to the bench to take their seat because Onwuser kept fouling guys out.
I was thinking we were doing the women's, the lightning round last women's podcast. Andrew asked, what was the most memorable game that you covered in women's basketball? I said, doesn't matter. Southern Utah versus Montana State men's basketball. That was the most memorable.
5 versus 12 or 6 versus 12 or something like that.
It was just a ridiculous game.
It was ridiculous. There was like probably 130 people there to see the entire thing.
That's generous.
When there's only 130 people in the gym, Brian Fish's incredibly loud yelling is even louder. So it was something to watch for sure. SkylineSportsMT.com, our 10th anniversary, thanks to our great friends at UpTop Clothing, legendary brand, helping present legendary athletes and legendary teams. Visit teamuptop.com all summer long. Use the promo code SKYLINE15 to get 15% off any and all of your online orders. UpTop Clothing, reminding you to take a step back and enjoy the moment. All right, the countdown begins. Team UpTop has been providing some of the coolest Montana-made gear and lifestyle clothing for more than a decade, and now the legendary brand is excited to partner with Skyline Sports to celebrate our 10th anniversary with a variety of top 10 lists, counting down some of the best athletes of the last decade throughout the Big Sky Conference. UpTop Clothing was started by a pair of Montana brothers who have a great passion for the Treasure State and all the people who make it so great. Whether you're in the market for Grizz, Bobcat, or Frontier Conference gear, whether you want a t-shirt or a cap hat or any other high-quality lifestyle clothing, be sure to visit teamuptop.com. If you shop online, use the checkout code SKYLINE15 to get 15% off all online orders. Teamuptop.com. UpTop Clothing, reminding you to take a step back and enjoy the moment. Enjoy the moment. All right, the countdown begins at number 10. We had to slot, I think, the best non-tournament team here, and we certainly talked about 2016 Montana, who was a team that went all the way to the Big Sky title game. They lost to Weber State. That team was led by Martin Broining, who was one of the best players that we've covered in the Big Sky Conference. But we went with 2019 Idaho. Talking about a 2 seed that was a great team that was supposed to be on a collision course with the great Grizz team of that season. That Idaho team beat that great Grizz team in Moscow in overtime. That's one of the top probably 5 regular season games I've covered. I made the road trip to Moscow. Idaho won on a tip at the buzzer. We ended up going with the Vandals. That's the greatest Don Verlin team of the Idaho era. I know a lot of Vandals fans have been longing for the days of Don Verlin since they made the I mean, how do you say it other than just wrong decision to move away from Don Verlin for a variety of minuscule and what I thought was non-relevant factors. Idaho was good to really good during the whole time that Verlin was there since rejoining the Big Sky. And then they've certainly fallen on hard times since then. That said, that team was stacked. Vic Sanders was a national level recruit who ended up choosing Moscow. BJ Blake was one of the best junior college players in the country. Ended up going playing for the Vandals. Perrin Collindret is still playing professionally overseas, a point guard from France. They had the Sherwood brothers, Nate and Chad, who were both really good players. Trayvon Allen was a young buck on that team as well. That was really not only a really good team, Brooks, and again, they lost in the first round of the Big Sky tournament to, I believe, Southern Utah. But that team had, I guess, how would you describe it? That team had a distinct and unique way of being, different than any other team we've covered.
Yeah, extremely high level of confidence. They definitely were not a mid-major team. That was like kind of a low major, or a true top 50, 60 kind of team in the country. Just by not only their veteran leadership, but the style and the swagger that they played with. It was just a different level. Also, I would argue that if that team won a title, they very likely are in the top 5 on this list.
For sure.
I don't know how they didn't.
I mean, again, that Grizz team went 16-2 in Big Sky play. That's the best record of the Big Sky of the Skyline era. And one of those wins, or one of the losses, was to Idaho.
Yeah, and I think they had 6 guys that were first team all league caliber players.
Yes.
That's a really unique thing. I mean, you have 2, you got a chance to win the title. If you have 3, you're gonna give teams issues. Most of the teams that we're gonna talk about have 3. They had 5 or 6.
One of the unforgettable parts about the Idaho team, not only was Vic Sanders' swagger and personality, but also his dad. His dad is one of the great Big Sky. We were doing Big Sky fans. His dad was just such an awesome fan. He was always around, going crazy in the stands. It takes some effort to be noticed as a parent of a player and to know right away that that's somebody's dad. He loved it. He loved his son, and he was
special.
Such an awesome fan.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of guys that I'm going to argue for on that top 10 list. Definitely, there's going to be floods of them on the All-Star memorable list. Vic Sanders' dad was a reason that they moved the tournament away from Reno and into Boise. Shout out Vic Sanders' dad.
Shout out Vic Sanders' dad, man. Love that guy. Skyline Sports, MT.com. So that's number 10. University of Idaho.
I think real quickly that's 2018, right? Not 19. You said 19.
Excuse me. It's 2017, 2018.
Yes, correct. Just to clarify.
Yep. You are correct. Number 9, it's the 2019-2020 Eastern Washington Eagles. This is the team that ran through the Big Sky Conference. They went 23-8 overall, including 16-4 in league play. Mason Peatling was the MVP of the league. Shante Leggins was the coach of the year. Jacob Davison was a second-team All-League selection, and Kim Aiken Jr. was a third-team All-League selection. This team was supposed to be one of the favorites going into the Big Sky tournament, along with probably Montana, Northern Colorado. Montana State was probably there, too, in Harold Frey's senior year and Danny Sprinkle's first year.
Yeah.
We never got to see any of it because the whole thing got called off. So
what a deal!
None of those people got to perform in the Big Sky tournament whatsoever. So there's a lot of woulda, coulda, shoulda. The Grizz team from that year would tell you, because the Eastern was the 1 seed, the Grizz were the 3 seed. Montana State was either the 4 or the 5 seed. The Grizz had unbelievable confidence going into that tournament because Saeed Pridgett was the best player in the conference at that exact moment.
Yep, no question.
And even though Eastern went 16-4 in league play, the Grizz swept them, including beating their absolute asses in Cheney.
Yeah.
That's probably the worst loss Eastern's experienced over the last 5 or 6 years. And so the Grizz were kind of licking their chops like, hey, we got the 3 seed, you got the 1, opposite sides of the bracket. We'll see you in the championship. They'd already played in the championship the 2 years prior.
Right.
Montana was certainly looking forward to it. But on the other hand, that team, 16-4 is a really good mark in Big Sky play. It was also sort of foreshadowing of things to come. And nothing truly distinct to point out about this team other than they just won a lot of games.
I think that you could say that in the 10 years, Mason Peatling is one of the, more underwhelming MVPs. But also, if you really looked at the body of work, it's such a high production player.
For sure.
He was a really, really good rebounder. He was great around the rim, had awesome touch, really good teammate. That team, which characterizes a lot of the Eastern teams we'll talk about, really were a team. Where we have some guys that are going to stand out and be stars. We talk about like maybe even Northern Colorado. They're kind of a star-driven, ball dominant. Of course, they're passing the rock, but a little bit different than what these Eastern teams are doing. And I'd always say this is kind of the peak of Shante Leggins and his stamp on what this program was. He continued to coach, continued to be around, but I think at this exact juncture of his career, he was riding it pretty high. So I think they slot really nicely at number 9. Also, this was kind of the emergence of Kim Aiken Jr., who ended up being a really, really dominant player before transferring out of the league.
There's also the factor where the system matters. Eastern Washington, if you're playing that 4 spot in that system, you were just going to be a 15 points and 8 rebounds per game guy. And then if you were good, you're going to be, 18 and 8,
10, yeah.
And if you're Jake Wiley, you're 24 and 12 every night. So Eastern Washington, because of the system and because of the great players, they had Jake Wiley, Bogdan Blizniuk, Mason Peatling, and Tanner Groves win MVP. That's 4 out of 5 MVPs in the Big Sky Conference, and so much of it's because of the spot they're playing within that system.
Team-oriented basketball, man.
All right, number 8. Montana State in 2022 is first Bobcat team to make the NCAA tournament since 1996. They went 27-8 overall, 16-4 in Big Sky Conference play. Jabril Bello won MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, and was a first-team All-Big Sky selection. That is a pretty rare trifecta. Very few players in Big Sky hoops history have done that. Xavier Bishop, the senior point guard, was also a first-team All-League selection. Amin Adamu was an honorable mention selection. Raekwon Battle, crazy to think, given the rise of Raekwon Battle, now he's scoring double figures in the NBA Summer League. He did not start that year for Montana State. He's the top reserve in the conference. And Danny Sprinkle was the coach of the year. That team also included Abdul Muhammad, was sort of the glue guy and a senior leader. Great Osabar was a good piece off the bench. He had not become what he is now, certainly, but he was a good player then. Tyler Patterson, basically the same role he's played at Montana State for a variety of years. Sam Lecolot was also sort of a spark guy off the bench. And then two guys that didn't end up sticking around at Montana State, Kellen Tynes, who ended up transferring to Maine, but he was a good backup point guard, good defender, and Borja Fernandez was the guy that made some shots off the bench as well, a young man from Spain. This team drilled Sac State 83-61 in the first round of the tournament. Then they outlasted Dillon Jones and Weber State in the first of two instant classics in the semifinals. And then they drilled Northern Colorado 87-66 in the tournament championship game. They went on to the NCAA tournament. They got seeded in San Diego. They had to play Texas Tech. Xavier Bishop and Amin Adamu were both hurt, but I don't think that really mattered. Texas Tech was the single biggest team I've ever seen live. I was floored when I was in person at this game. Couldn't believe how big and how much length they had. Every single one of their guys was bigger than Jabril Bello, and Jabril Bello was the biggest guy in the Big Sky that year. So it was startling to see. All that said, one of the probably most disappointing performances by a Big Sky champion in the NCAA tournament. Montana State lost 97-62. I think that dings them. I think this team would probably be a notch or two higher if it wasn't for how it ended. But you do got to give them credit for being a breakthrough team, the first Bobcat team to go to the NCAA tournament in more than a quarter century.
Yeah, I mean, Jabril Bello was struggling with his knees. I mean, they were all beat up, and he was heating and icing and everything you could possibly do. Colter, this team, I mean, I know Raekwon Battle didn't get drafted, but he's a kind of guy that is an NBA player that could get drafted in the second round in a year. And Great Osabar is going to get drafted. So we're talking about, they brought two NBA guys off the bench. We're talking about a high level team here. And also, as we mentioned on the top, Danny Sprinkle coming back and putting his stamp on the thing.
Yep.
I think it's pretty straightforward.
All right, number 7, the 2020-2021 Eastern Washington team. This is the team that played the season that was not canceled at the end by the pandemic, but that was certainly incurred by the pandemic. Weird scheduling this year. This team went 16-8, but they had like 7 straight non-conference losses because they were just playing on the road. They went 12-3 in Big Sky Conference play, though. The format for these games was you'd play 2 in a row against the same team, Thursday, Saturday, at the other team's place or at your place. So it's kind of funky. I kind of throw out that whole regular season. This team, though, was led by Tanner Groves, who turned into an MVP. Talk about a great career trajectory. He was just sort of a middling player who then became one of the dominant bigs that we've covered. Kim Aiken took the next step, was a Defensive Player of the Year and a first-team All-League selection. And then Tyler Robertson was the top reserve in the league. They also had great role players like Jack Perry, Michael Meadows, Jacob Groves, who's Tanner Groves' little brother, and Kassan Rouse. This team won 66-60 over Northern Arizona in the first round of the Big Sky tournament. They destroyed Montana, ran them off the court 78-50 in the Big Sky semifinals. And then they outlasted upstart Montana State 65-55 in the Big Sky championship. The reason that this team is slotted ahead of that last Montana State team and the reason this team is slotted where they are, to me, is how they finished the year. They had a great run through the Big Sky tournament. Then they had one of the more impressive performances by a Big Sky team in the NCAA tournament. They took Kansas all the way down the wire. Groves had the best performance of any player that we've ever covered in the NCAA tournament. He had 38 points, and Eastern Washington loses 93-84 in one of the strangest games I've ever been to. It was in the the tournament was at a single site, Indianapolis. Myself and Riley Corcoran went. I got to watch 16 first and second round games. So we were just all over Indianapolis.
How it should be.
This one, though, was it was at the Indianapolis Fairgrounds, 30 minutes outside of town. It's like if you were playing at Frenchtown High School or something like that. There was seriously 300 people at this game. It was so weird. We were sitting with all the Eastern Washington parents because Shante Leggins hooked us up with tickets because he couldn't even get press passes because they wouldn't let media really go. So we're sitting there with like the Groves' parents and Jacob Davison's parents. There's like a couple Kansas people there. It's like if a tree falls in the woods, does anybody, and no one's around to hear it, does it make a sound? It's exactly what it was like in this weird gym. Either way, it was an epic performance by Eastern.
What you're describing, Colter, is exactly up Tanner Groves' alley.
Yeah.
This is it, man. Put him in a 300-person gym and let him just go bang the boards.
No kidding.
He's unquestionably one of the best players we've covered. His senior year was as dominant as anyone has done it. I mean, Jake Wiley's up there.
For sure.
A couple other bigs. You already mentioned Martin Broining. And
Syed Pridgett had a great senior year.
I mean, we're talking about domination.
Yes.
There was no one that was going to beat this team with him on it. And, I mean, they ended up transferring to Oklahoma, him and his brother. He goes 17-10 in the Big Sky, goes straight to Oklahoma, goes 17-10.
Join Town Pump's Pump It Up Rewards Plus program and never pay full price for fuel again.
Save 5 cents on every gallon every day at any Town Pump across Montana.
Plus, earn and redeem points on your favorite in-store items to get free stuff with our clubs.
Stop in and pick up a rewards card. Download the Pump It Up Rewards Plus app today.
Or visit townpump.com/rewards to register and start saving.
Right down the road, pump it up, oh yeah.
Number 6 on our top 10 countdown, probably presented by Cash One Pawn. Shop online, cash1pawn.com. That's cash, the number one pawn.com, your premier pawn shop in Western Montana. Number 6 is the 2017 North Dakota squad. UND went 22-10 overall, 14-4 in Big Sky Conference play. Quentin Hooker was a first-team All-League selection and the Big Sky Tournament MVP. Gino Crandall was a second-team All-League selection. Cortez Seals was the top reserve, and Brian Jones wins Coach of the Year. They also had a great supporting cast, including Carson Shanks, who ended up transferring to Loyola Chicago and playing in the Final Four. Connor Avance, one of my favorite guys that we've covered in the league, an old-school, undersized, big fundamental when it came to operating in the post. Drick Bernstein, one of the more unique and skilled power forward guys that we've covered. And then Marlon Stewart, former high school rival of Montana State's Tyler Hull, who was a good role player there for UND as well. In the Big Sky Tournament, they drilled Portland State 95-72. They beat Idaho 69-64 in the semis. And then in an all-time classic Big Sky Championship game, they outlasted Weber State 93-89 in overtime. This team then got seeded as a 13 seed, and they went to Salt Lake, they got seeded as a 15 seed. They were playing against Arizona. I was looking at Arizona as the number 4, not seed, but they were the number 4 team in the country. So it's a 2-15 matchup, which is usually a huge disaster for the Big Sky. But UND got up and down, and they ended up losing 100-82, but scoring 82 against the number 4 team in the country. A pretty good effort. You lobbied hard for this UND team. Why?
My favorite team on this list, it's not really particularly close. I thought the leadership by Quentin Hooker and Gino Crandall is unmatched. I mean, Quentin Hooker is the best get-it-going guy that we've covered. We've had some good point guards in the league. We talked about Xavier Bishop at some point. I mean, there's been some guys. Ahmad Rory is going to be high on this list. But when you talk about someone that makes your teammates better, there was no one like it. And I always tell people this, right? I say it on the pod all the time. When you're sitting on the baseline, when I'm sitting on a football field, when I'm 2 feet away from it, you can just see it.
Right.
Sometimes in football, it hits a little different. You can hear it. You can hear the sound of it. You hear coaches and how they talk. You hear players and how they talk. Watching this North Dakota team run the fast break and the secondary fast break from the baseline is like nothing we've ever covered.
This is also foreshadowing of things to come. Gino Crandall transferred to Gonzaga. Carson Shanks transferred to Loyola Chicago. Drick Bernstein, I can't remember where he
Gonzaga
transferred.
as well.
Gonzaga.
Yeah.
Cortez Seals transferred. This was before this whole free transfers and transfer portal era.
Yeah.
All those guys did not finish at UND, though, so it was foreshadowing of things to come. We were definitely between this UND team and our number 5 team, which is Weber State, from the season before, 2015-2016. We went with Weber over at UND slightly just because of the 2, I think, all-time great players that they
All-time
had
greats.
leading the way. Joel Wallenboy was the MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, and first-team All-League selection. Jeremy Senglin was a first-team All-League selection as well, finished his career in the top 4 in league history in total points. Kendall Hill was a top reserve in the Big Sky that year. This Weber team went 26-9, 15-3 in Big Sky Conference play. In the Big Sky Tournament, They outlasted Portland State 78-74. They got past UND in overtime 83-78, and then they beat Montana 62-59 in a battle of titans, a defensive slugfest, but a great matchup between Bollenboy and Martin Breuning, and one of the more memorable championship games we've covered. It was the last great Weber State team. Weber State's had good teams since then, but this is the last time they went to the NCAA tournament. They lost 71-53 to Xavier in St. Louis. This team got Randy Ray a huge contract extension, and I don't know if those two things are connected or not, but Weber was good and never great again. That's here nor there. This team was excellent. Jeremy Sanglin is going to be absolutely one of our top 10 guys of the Skyline era. I think Bollenboy is too. Bollenboy is still the career.
Oh, man, got to be.
He's the career leader in rebounding in the history of the league, and
no one like him.
A physically dominant player that is totally unique in the way that he was able to perform. So, I don't know. I know you wanted UND maybe ahead of this Weber team.
No, I wanted to keep this ahead because I think the legacy that Bollenboy and Sanglin left is as strong as any legacy of any tandem that's out there.
Right. When we were thinking about, okay, who are we going to be our number one nominees for top 10? Like those two guys are the two. Like those are like the two
guys you think of.
Like they're seriously two of the top guys you think of for sure.
When I think of Big Sky basketball during the Skyline era, I think of Martin Breuning and Jalil Bollenboy banging.
Yes.
It's what I think of.
Yep.
Like the first thing is Bollenboy and his arms and his body and his size and his physicality. And I mean, I don't know how he didn't play in the NBA.
He got drafted.
I know, but like probably doesn't have enough touch around the rim. But gosh dang, the physicality. And then Sanglin, I mean, you're talking about we talk about the Splash Sisters at Idaho. We talk about legendary shooters, Tyler Hall, someone like that. Sanglin's right there, man.
Oh, absolutely.
There is no one that hits shots
and he has
like
more.
him.
He has more levels to his game.
He absolutely does, and he's another guy that is borderline NBA player. And then Kendall Hill, underrated. Was he a Florida transfer? Where did he come from?
No, you're thinking of the guy they've had more recently.
Yeah, I am.
But Kendall Hill was really good.
I loved Kendall Hill, number 35. I always remember it. He was a great player, great top reserve. This is a really good team. I think that this team and the UND team are these mature teams that have great coaching and leadership that we're not going to see players like this in the Big Sky very often anymore. Every now and then, but we're not going to see Bollenboy. We're not going to see guys like Quentin Hooker or even Drick Bernstein fall into the Big Sky these days.
That's right. Skyline Sports MT.com, 10th anniversary. Probably presented by Town Pump. Town Pump's kept us fueled up for years now. No matter where you're at in Montana, there's a Town Pump near you. Montana's best for more than 6 decades. Number 4 on our countdown, the 2018-2019 Montana Grizzlies. This is the second straight championship for the Grizz. They went 26-9 to tie the school record for victories, 16-4 in Big Sky Conference play. Ahmad Rory and Syed Pridgett were each first-team All-League selections. Michael Ogine was a third-team All-League selection. Kendall Manuel, after transferring from Oregon State, was the newcomer of the year and the top reserve in the league. This team also featured Jamara Coe, who would have been a all-league performer if he didn't get hurt down the stretch of this season. Bobby Moorhead, who was a great do-it-all sort of a junkyard dog type guy, 3-and-D type of perimeter defender and three-point shooter, and then Donovan Dorsey, who was a great transfer from the University of Washington. Timmy Falls also played some big minutes off the bench. This Grizz team got past Sac State 79-73 in the first round of the Big Sky tournament. Then in probably the signature game of Ahmad Rory's career, Montana just destroyed Weber 78-49 in the semis, and then they got past who had been probably the biggest thorn in their side during this little time span when they beat Eastern Washington 68-62. This team drew Michigan for the second year in a row in the NCAA tournament. It was really unfortunate that happened. First of all, it's Michigan. I mean, they went to the Final Four 2 years in a row, but also it just sucks having a team that knows you. Like there's no element of surprise. It was just such a screw job by the committee, but they lost 74-55 in their second straight NCAA tournament matchup. Brooks, it's funny because this team's number 4 on our top 10 countdown. This team should be the number 1 team.
They should be number 1, yeah. Could be.
They're the most talented team. This is
agreed.
This is the senior year for the most talented class that we've seen. Ahmad Rory, Michael Ogine, Kendall Manuel, Bobby Moorhead, and Jamara Coe.
Yep.
They, it's hard to say that winning 26 games and tying the school record was a disappointment, but this team certainly had lulls.
They did.
Then they had, their come to Jesus meeting, and then they absolutely just destroyed that home weekend. They scored like 110 points against North Dakota. They were running and gunning, and everybody's thinking, oh man, this is like what Travis DeCuire promised when he got hired.
Yep.
And then they turned it on down the stretch. But either way, this is probably the most talented team overall that we've covered.
I 100% agree. And getting blitzed by Michigan, it plays. We put it as part of the criteria. Having to play them again, and of course, none of that is out of your. That's all out of your control. But still, I mean, taking that shot's not easy. Also, as you mentioned, some ups and downs during the season. At times, left a little bit to be desired. When you have this much talent, I think that the hard questions were coming in of, why isn't this team, why are they losing 9 games and not 3 or 4? As you mentioned, one of the most talented teams. Once you're in this top 4 here, Colter, you're one of the great teams in the last 25 years of the Big Sky. I mean, this team is as good as any team has been this century.
Number 3 is our Montana State team from 2023. This team actually did not win the regular season Big Sky title. They went 25-10 overall, 15-3 in league play. Raekwon Battle was a first-team All-League selection. Jabril Bello, a second team. Darius Brown, the Defensive Player of the Year. And a third team. And Great Osabar, his coming out party as the top reserve. They also featured Caleb Fuller, Nick Gonzalez, Tyler Patterson, Robert Ford III, and Sam Lekala in the rotation. They beat Northern Colorado in the first round of the tournament. Then they beat Weber State in double overtime in the longest and latest game we've ever covered, 60-58. And then they ran past Northern Arizona 85-78. In the NCAA tournament, they lost 77-65 to Kansas State in Greensboro, North Carolina. I put this team over the other Bobcat team because I just think they're straight up better. I think Raekwon Battle being your best player and his emergence just made them better than that team from the year before. Darius Brown's just better than Xavier Bishop. Raekwon Battle's just better than Amin Adamu. And Jabril Bello was the same. He kind of got knocked down a notch on the all-league list because people were, he'd already swept the awards. So they just didn't give it to him. But he was still, the dominant force in the conference. And then they also had one of the best tournament performances of any team that we've covered.
Yeah, 100% agree. This is a really, really good team. I agree that they are better. Also, they had a really good tournament performance. Raekwon Battle played well in the tournament. I mean, they're going against a number 4 seed, and that ended up going pretty far. I believe Kansas State went to the Elite 8, maybe?
They did, yeah. Marquise Noel.
Yeah, that was a sweet run. Anyway, the tournament thing matters, man. When you go to a national stage and you got a squad and you got to play well, even if you get a bad draw. And they played really well.
Raekwon Battle probably had the number 2 performance of Big Sky guys over the last 10 years in the tournament. He scored like 28, I believe.
Yeah, man. And he had so much juice in those moments, just flying. And
the sad part now is if you have these big time games in the NCAA tournament against Power 5s, then you're just getting recruited.
You just go to Power 5.
Like you're just recruited by that conference.
And then the Raekwon Battle rule was invented where, if you want to go look up all the legal battles that he had to go through to even have a chance to play. And I don't know how he ended up going to West Virginia, but time goes on. Charlotte Hornets, be a fan.
We're going to come back to a lot of this stuff in our top 10s too, so we'll keep on moving. Number 2, 2015 Eastern Washington. They went 26-9 overall. They were a second place team in the regular season because they were 14-4 in league. Montana got the tiebreaker. Montana hosts the tournament. This is the last non-neutral site tournament in Big Sky history. This team was led by Tyler Harvey, who was a first-team All-League selection and an AP All-American. Vacay Joyce was a first-team All-League selection. Drew Brandon was an honorable mention All-League selection. This team also featured Parker Kelly, Cody Benzel, a up-and-coming Bogdan Blizniak, and Felix Van Off. This team has the marquee non-conference win of the Skyline Sports era. They beat Indiana at Assembly Hall, 88-86. They also won at San Francisco that year. And then in the Big Sky tournament, they outlast a sharp-shooting, high-scoring Idaho team, 91-83. They get past Sac State, 91-83. And then in the Big Sky tournament championship game, they beat the host Montana Grizzlies, 69-65 on their home court. This team goes then to the NCAA tournament as a 13 seed. They lose 84-74 to Georgetown in Portland. This team gets number 2 for me because they got the best non-conference win. They had probably the most reputable national honor of any Big Sky team with Tyler Harvey. He was the leading three-point shooter in the country that year. That's how he got up to the AP All-American list. And they also performed well in the NCAA tournament. But the trump card is that they won on a non-neutral court. They won on a hostile court in Missoula to sort of just end the dreams of the Grizzlies in Travis DeCuire's first year.
Tremendous team. I mean, Vacay Joyce was going to be high on this list when we talk about top 10 guys. If you don't remember him, I mean, goodness gracious. Tyler Harvey still playing professional basketball. Venke Joy still playing professional basketball. I mean, we're talking about 10-plus years of playing pro ball. Amazing talents. Interesting coaching style. It's kind of the beginning of the Australian wave at Eastern, which has continued and continued. This team was absolutely electric, and they were so darn good. And to win in Missoula the way that they did with the confidence that they had, I mean, there's nothing like it.
Our number one team in the last 10 years in the Skyline Sports era is the 2018 Montana Grizzlies. They went 26-8, overall 16-2 in Big Sky Conference play. Ahmad Rory was a first-team All-Big Sky selection. Michael Ogine was a second team, as well as the Defensive Player of the Year. Jamara Coe landed on the third team, and Travis DeCure was the Big Sky Coach of the Year. This team also included Fabian Krizelvik, Bobby Moorhead, Timmy Falls, and Carl Nicholas. This team won at Pitt early, a sign of things to come. Then they beat a good North Dakota team in the first round of the tournament. Their 91-89 win over Northern Colorado is one of the craziest games we've ever covered.
Love that game.
I mean, snatching victory from the jaws of defeat.
Baby.
And they did it in such a thrilling way. And then they just trumped Eastern Washington 82-65. This team got Michigan. This is the first time around for Michigan. They lost 61-47 in Wichita, Kansas. This is our number one team because of their league record, because of the way they dominated the league. They had a 14-point differential. That's the largest in the history of the Big Sky, let alone in the Skyline Sports era. They had a 12-game winning streak. They lost 2 in a row, and then they won out all the way until the NCAA tournament. But probably the most striking statistic is this team had the exact same starting lineup from game 1 to game 34. It's the only time in the history of the league that's happened, and that's why this team was had such great continuity and chemistry.
Yeah, you just said they went on a 24-2 run. I mean, come on now. The continuity, the chemistry, the domination, the level of confidence. The league also, as you mentioned, Colter, at that time, those wins in the tournament, North Dakota, Northern Colorado, and Eastern those are good teams that they're playing. They're not any rollovers. I think that this team is obviously extremely memorable. This is also kind of the peak of the Ahmad Rory, Michael Ogine. Of course, in 19, they go run it back and do it again. But this is at that, you have 2 guards in the back, literally not only willing teams to win, but dominating, becoming a legendary duo in the Big Sky. And I think that's an understatement.
There you go. We'll talk so much more Ben's Hoops throughout the month of July, but appreciate everybody for tuning in. SkylineSportsMT.com. Thanks to our great sponsors. Cash One Pawn, your premier pawn shop in Western Montana. UpTop Clothing, reminding you to take a step back and enjoy the moment. And Town Pump, Montana's best for more than 6 decades. We'll be back at it a little bit later on, but in the meantime, thanks so much for listening, and be good. SkylineSportsMT.com. Skyline Sports, every day, every season. Team UpTop has been providing some of the coolest Montana-made gear and lifestyle clothing for more than a decade, and now the legendary brand is excited to partner with Skyline Sports to celebrate our 10th anniversary with a variety of top 10 lists, counting down some of the best athletes of the last decade throughout the Big Sky Conference. UpTop Clothing was started by a pair of Montana brothers who have a great passion for the Treasure State and all the people who make it so great. Whether you're in the market for Grizz, Bobcat, or Frontier Conference gear, whether you want a t-shirt or a cap hat or any other high-quality lifestyle clothing, be sure to visit teamuptop.com. If you shop online, use the checkout code SKYLINE15 to get 15% off all online orders. Teamuptop.com. UpTop Clothing, reminding you to take a step back and enjoy the moment.